Welcome into 2-4-1 Drafts. Austin Gayle here with Mike Renner. We are going to be diving into a ton today on the episode. We got our all draft stock team, an article you dropped on the website earlier this week. We're going to be looking at pretty much it's the biggest risers this season, right?
Yeah, so I maybe misnamed that a little bit, all draft stock. I mean, that could go either way, but It's guys who raised their draft stock, guys who weren't necessarily on our radar, or if they were on our radar, were pretty low on in heading into this season, and then shot up our boards.
There you go. And we're also going to do our draft special segment, looking at previewing some of the top rookie matchups upcoming week. Then we're going to chug a prospect. Got to chug Jordan Love.
Jordan Love. I don't know why the hell. We'll get to it later, obviously, but I have no clue why he declared.
How?
Like, he could have transferred to maybe not Oklahoma. They have Rattler, whatever, the number one recruit at quarterback who's in the wings. So maybe they wouldn't have taken him, but someone would have taken him. LSU maybe would have taken him. Texas Tech would have taken him. He has a big year there. He could go top 5 next year. I know it's Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence already, sort of set in stone there in the top 10 of the 2021 draft, but there's not like there's a shortage of quarterbacks. Like, team would probably still take you in the top 5 if you had a monster year. Has all the talent in the world. I cannot believe he declared after what we saw from him this year, which we'll get into then later.
What's really frustrating too, I mean, I heard from some people, in the league talking about they expected him.
From in the league?
They expected him to transfer.
Return.
There was this, they were expecting a transfer, not him to return to Utah State, but they were expecting him to transfer to another school. So that's very interesting. I'm interested to know the feedback he got from that committee or whatever that tells you whether or not where you're going to go in the draft. To be interesting. But let's go ahead and dive into this all draft stock team. Some risers, and no better. Start at the quarterback position. Joe Burrow, above average Joe, whatever you want to call him. This guy has been a rocket. I mean, you were talking about him since like week 3. Like, oh man, this guy's looking very, very good. And then week 5 rolls around, week 6, and then all of a sudden he's at the top of everyone's mock draft.
Yeah, it was like week 3, and I was like, damn, he's had 2 games that were probably the best 2 games I've seen from like any of the prospects at any point in time. Like, they were just that good. Not up against great competition necessarily, but he just had done it. Like, it was just a high level that we really hadn't seen. And then all of a sudden, that was every single game he basically played this year. So I think it's about time to start talking about Joe Burrow, like I said, in sort of best prospect since X sort of terms. Not just should he go number 1. How much better of a prospect is he than even Kyler Murray last year, than Baker Mayfield? Because I think with every passing game where he dominates another good defense, he's starting to pass up some of those guys, for some former number 1 overall picks in my mind. And I feel very confident about Joe Burrow being a franchise quarterback option. The Bengals just have to not fuck it up at this point.
To give an idea of the rise, in 2018, a 79.5 overall grade for Joe Burrow, completed 218 passes from 377 attempts for 2,890 yards.
Yeah, sub 60 completion percentage.
Yes.
Every game this year has been above 70.
That's ridiculous. 57.8% to be exact. And this year, an absolute rocket, as I mentioned, 94.3 overall grade, 78% of his passes completed, 48 touchdowns, 6 picks. It's been incredible. It's such a rise. And we did an article on the website, and another analyst, Anthony Tresh, looking at the offense and how much it's gotten better. A lot of it is Burrow. Yes, Joe Brady, he's had, he's turned that offense around a little bit, made it a better passing offense. But from an accuracy standpoint, when you're looking at his play out of structure, Joe Burrow has really impressed this year.
No, yeah, I mean, like, it's sort of like a twofold. You don't just flip overnight with no help scheme-wise, no help from the offensive players around you. You don't make that big of a leap. But he has made, in his own right, for him, a massive leap, again, the likes of which we've never seen here at PFF. So, yes, Joe Burrow, number 1 overall pick. Lock it in right now. And he's on the precipice of possibly breaking the PFF grade for highest graded quarterback. And that's against the SEC. Kyler Murray, I think, was, and that's against the Big 12. So he could break it against SEC and then in the college football playoff also. Jesus.
Let's move to running back on this all-draft stock team here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the LSU running back, 5'8", 209 pounds. Watched a ton of his tape this morning, and he reminds me a little bit of Jerick McKinnon, Giovanni Bernard, like that similar size, that similar
Is that type of back, yeah.
Agility, athleticism. What I was really impressed with, though, I think in the open field, he makes people miss. That's the biggest thing for me. And then secondly, when he does run forward, when he is trying to wear contact, he wears it well. It's not something where he's getting knocked back like some other smaller backs. I saw he's not as good, not nearly as good, but Deandre Washington out of Texas Tech, when he was coming out, he had that similar like lower frame where it's a little bit thicker than most guys for a guy his size. Like I said, 5'8", 209 pounds. I've been really impressed with his ability. I think he fits in the modern NFL. He runs like a Texas route or an angle route against Georgia in this past week. That's very, very impressive. I think he can run routes too.
Yeah, he went from 10 catches last year to 50 already this year. And the crazier thing is he broke a 33 tackles on 147 attempts last year, which is fine. That's not anything special in terms of tackle breaking ability, but 63 this year on 196 attempts. So almost twice as many on only 50 more, almost 50 more carries there for him. So he's breaking a lot more tackles. And like you mentioned, that receiving ability is fairly legit in space, has that scat back sort of potential in the NFL. People see CSI is probably not thinking of him as an every down option, but he's the kind of guy we'll like in terms of his receiving ability, tackle breaking ability. 12
forced missed tackles on those 50 receptions as well, which isn't a terrible ratio. Going forward here, let's go to Juwan Jennings, the Tennessee wide receiver. This guy's very interesting. Very hard to tackle, a bigger receiver. I think when he catches the football, kind of guys bounce off of him. I think what I noticed though when I was watching a lot of his film, Josh Palmer, the other receiver for Tennessee, he was running some nice routes. There are a couple routes, number 5 for Tennessee, where Juwan Jennings is getting the target, and then Palmer's running a pretty crispy route, and he's like frustrated on the sideline. I saw several of those on Juwan Jennings' tape. But Juwan Jennings, very interesting prospect for sure.
He is the most probably elusive prospect in this draft class in terms of after the catch ability. 29 broken tackles this year on, I believe, 57 catches, but also he's broken 6 tackles on 11 rushes this year. Guys can't bring him down. He's 6'3", 208, and has just absurd after the catch ability so far this year. And the thing is, he had only 438 yards last year. 580 back in 2016 was his career high. That was his sophomore year. He got injured, wrist injury 2017, missed that whole season. Really nothing to sort of like indicate that he would break out this year, 942 yards. And I think I said before that South Carolina game, if you're going to watch any one game from him, was one of the most impressive receiving performances I saw all season.
And I think when you say elusive, I think a big reason he's breaking a ton of tackles is guys are literally falling off of him. I think he does
powerful.
He does a very good job of when he catches the football, of when he is contacted. It's not like he's leaving people with their ankles broken. When he's contacted, he wears that contact well, runs through tackles and breaks them that way. I think that's what I was really impressed with Juwan Jennings. And now we go to another receiver that's very big, probably a lot bigger than Juwan James. Well, I guess not a lot, but pretty decent. Sage Surratt of Wake Forest suffered a season-ending injury this year, but before that, raised his draft stock pretty well. I will say this, he's pretty slow.
Yes.
He's a slow receiver.
Probably 4.6s.
Physical, wins with his physicality at the line of scrimmage and away from the line of scrimmage. Very big receiver. And again, I was watching another receiver while I was turning on Wake Forest, Scotty Washington.
He's
6'5".
Huge,
what is that? But I thought in some cases, when you watch them running routes at the same time, Scotty was a little bit more sudden at the line of scrimmage and sometimes even more physical than Sage Surratt.
Don't disrespect Surratt like that. Over 1,000 yards in 9 games. He was on pace to feasibly win the Blitnikoff before he got hurt. 18 contested catches on 30 opportunities. Elite in that regard. I think that's top 5 in the nation still, those 18 contested catches. He is... like I said, if you're not fast, you're not going to separate down the football field, which we really didn't see from Surratt. You better be damn good at all the rest of the things. I think he's pretty damn good at the rest of the things in terms of contested catch ability, winning with his physicality, 6'3", 215. He's got for a redshirt sophomore wide receiver, he's already got a pretty developed NFL body. So I do think he could declare if need be, or if he wants to. He'd probably be a day 2 guy at this point.
Day 2, yeah, I think that makes sense.
Him and Juwan Jennings, I think both day 2 guys at this point.
Let's go to tight end, Hunter Bryant, maybe even a better receiver than Sage Surratt. This guy is impressive. I mean, they play him in the big slot a ton at Washington, largely because he doesn't look like a tight end. I think, 6'3", 6'4", 230 pounds. I was really impressed.
240's listed at.
Okay,
which
240.
He doesn't look 240.
He does not. I mean, there's a couple clips of him warming up pregame without a shirt, and the dude looks like a wide receiver. And he plays like a wide receiver. He's good after the catch.
You're really good at finding these guys without a shirt somewhere. Was it A.J. Dillon you looked up?
It's actually a bookmarked tab, so I could show you it later if you want. I was looking at a clip of him without a shirt or pants on, and it was crazy. It was very nice. But I like his athletic ability. I think he looked a lot. It's easy to make the comp to Evan Ingram.
Yes.
He's an athletic tight end prospect that I think in today's NFL, when more and more people are using more slot receivers, I think he could be, with a good offense, be one of the better tight ends in this class.
Yeah, so he moved a lot in our eyes because so one of the biggest things is we're not going to just base our opinion off a guy with small sample size. So he had only played like 300 snaps in his career heading into this year. Now he was great on those, and like he showed the natural talent. So from that perspective, like you could already see that he was a freak athlete. He didn't all of a sudden jump off the tape like Jennings or Surratt. Like their contested catch ability and the after the catch ability was somewhat new for us. We hadn't seen it necessarily in the past. With Hunter Bryant, we saw the receiving skills. We just needed to see it over a longer period of time. We needed to see him not get hurt because that's why he didn't play as much freshman sophomore years because of injury. So I do think that Hunter Bryant, with the full season, 825 yards this year. I mean, he proved to us that, yeah, he's a dude as far as athletic receiving tight end goes. Probably going to be the tight end one in this draft class. Really?
Over Pinckney?
Yeah, over Pinckney. I mean, he's just a better receiver, better all around, going to be more athletic. Pinckney, not going to add much to your blocking scheme either. So I think that's probably going to be Bryant. The only worry is, is he going to be so small? Like we said, he looks 230. He's listed at 240. If he shows up and he's 230, you're not playing tight end. Like no one's gonna. You bring him out in the field and say 11 personnel. No one's gonna respect your running game. What he can add to that. He's just gonna. They're gonna assume that basically 4 wide receivers at that point.
Let's go to the offensive line here, starting with left tackle Josh Jones of Houston. He's a guy that when we brought Dane on the podcast, he talked about Jones having 4 or 5 different offensive line coaches at Houston, and wild. A big reason why he struggled to string any consistency together, string any technique together. But this year, an absolute just rise for him. A 93.2 overall grade in 2019. He didn't earn a grade above 77.5 in the 3 years prior.
Yeah,
I think he really took a step forward this year, and I think that, along with what he's probably going to do at the Senior Bowl, is going to put this guy up there in the top 50.
Yeah, and we kind of pulled no punches last spring with Ed Oliver when he came out being like they didn't coach this guy up. His technique didn't get better from freshman year to junior year necessarily, and so I even imagine if it didn't happen on the D line, I'm guessing it probably wasn't happening too much on the offensive line either. And so for him to take this massive leap with, like you mentioned, 4 different offensive line coaches, I'm a big fan of his game. Have unabashedly been pumping his tires this whole season. So yes, going from 62.8 run blocking grade last year to 92.7 this year is a pretty massive leap.
Another guy on this list is Trey Smith. Give me your take on him.
Yeah, so Trey Smith has, it's been no secret that he's one of the most talented offensive linemen in the country. Was a top, I think he was a 5-star recruit coming out. Played 3 different positions as a freshman and played fairly well for Tennessee, true freshman year 2 years ago. Then he's had blood clots in his lungs the past couple off seasons, so he hasn't even practiced. And so when he came, last year they flipped him to left tackle and had him play left tackle exclusively, but basically didn't get an off season to prepare. Comes in and it just didn't go well. Had a 59.9 pass blocking grade. Was not the results they had hoped. They kick him inside to guard over the course of this offseason because, again, he couldn't practice, had the blood clots in his lungs, got shut down for most of the offseason, gets cleared to play right on right in the eve of the season. And then they throw him out there against Georgia State, BYU. Didn't go too great then. But since then, from week 4 on, he's been a top 5 graded left guard in all college football. He's looked like a much different player. I think just getting him seeing those reps, seeing him stick at one position that he's probably going to play in the NFL, left guard, or just any interior line position, have him play well, huge for his draft stock in our eyes.
Let's go to center Temple, Matt Hennessy. This is a guy that a lot of people are fans of him. I think he's risen on a lot of boards around here. An 87.0 overall grade in 2019. He's always been one of the better pass blockers in college football. You look at his grading profile in 2018, a 90.7 pass blocking grade. 2017, an 86.6. I think that's where you really have to be impressed with. When you're putting that level of consistency as a pass protector, it's huge. But the center position, probably more so than a lot of the other offensive line positions, run blocking is so important. You need to be a better run blocker than I'd say a better pass protector, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think with him, an 86.9 run blocking grade this year is impressive.
Yeah, so he was 3-year starter for them, and he's listed at 295. He just was very strength needed to come a long way, and I think we saw that this year in terms of his performance. His run blocking grade took a huge jump. His play strength was a lot better than what we'd seen from him in years past. Now he's got a Senior Bowl invite. He's definitely making his way up our board. Probably going to be in our next top 100 actually I think he was in our last top 100. I should probably know it's the top 100. I put it together, but he's definitely that sort of prospect, like a third round sort of center at this point.
What's your take on the interior offensive line class overall? It seems like it's pretty weak. I mean,
I'm not a huge fan.
Compared to last year, I mean, there were a ton of Garrett Bradbury and people kind of fell in love with Drew Samia.
I don't think it's that great of an interior offensive line class. I'm not sure there's a single guy I'd take in the first round. I don't think Vitani Muti's coming out, would be my favorite one, the Fresno State guard. So I think it's a lot of probably like 3 day 2 guys, 3 or 4 day 2 guys, and then a lot of tackle converts. It is probably going to be your best bet. That's always your best bet. That's like usually going to be your best bet. Going from college offensive linemen, because that's where they put their best offensive linemen. But yeah, so there's probably a handful of tackle converts I'd take day 2 that you'd kick inside. Something like Calvin Throckmorton from Oregon, some guys like that.
Let's go to right guard. Ohio State's Wyatt Davis, 6'4", 313 pounds, and an 81.5 overall grade this season. Yeah,
and so he's another one. It's like he's a good offensive lineman. I take him day 2, but I think he's a redshirt sophomore. He is a redshirt sophomore. I don't think he'd declare at this point. It's just rare to see a lot of redshirt sophomores unless you're going super high in the draft, especially on the offensive line, where usually you pretty much see guys' draft stock consistently go up because there's so much development at the position. They get a lot better. But this is my favorite offensive line prospect at Ohio State since Taylor Decker back in 2016. I didn't particularly love Taylor Decker, but again, I didn't love Billy Price, Michael Jordan, Pat Elflein, those guys when they were coming out. So I think he's going to be my favorite prospect whenever he does declare. Athletic, powerful, didn't allow a single sack or hit this year after barely getting into the lineup. Started for them in their bowl and the conference championship game last year. Didn't look great. Allowed 7 pressures over a handful of games last year. Much different player this year. And like I said, my favorite Ohio State offensive line prospect since in a few years now.
Let's go to right tackle. I think this is a guy that has a very good chance to go in the first round, if not a lock for the first round. Jedrek Wills of Alabama, the right tackle. He's earned a 91.4 run blocking grade this year, Monster. A huge step up from his 63.1 run blocking grade in 2018. A very explosive dude, a guy that can get to the second level quickly. He can also pancake kids. Watching his impact blocks,
the big
time blocks playlist in PFF's charting
only Penny Sewell has more at the tackle position this year, so that should tell you the sort of company he keeps in terms of how he's produced. Yeah, he's just so explosive. And NFL offensive line coach is going to see that, and eyes are going to get real wide because they think an athlete like that just doesn't come around too often. And it's sort of, he is probably on Teron Armstead, Lane Johnson level of where he's going to just test so much off the charts physically that I think you're going to see him. It's just going to work out eventually because so much of tackle play is simply having that necessary athleticism to mirror and stay in front of defensive ends. So I do think Jedrek Wills took a massive step forward this year.
Let's move a little bit quicker here. Let's jump on the 2 defensive interiors, Jordan Elliott of Missouri and Bravion Roy. Both of these guys, rising up draft. So I really like Jordan Elliott. Jordan Elliott's legit. I really do like his pass rushing potential at the next level.
That's why I said this D tackle class is so hard to parse out. We talked about it on the earlier pod, but 1 through 4 right now, they're all on even playing field. Elliott had a monster year. He was unblockable in pretty much every single game he played in this season. And just because he played for Missouri, I don't think a lot of people would see the tape because they were so bad this year. No one's necessarily noticed, but he was about as dominant a defensive tackle as we saw in college football this year. And then Roy, nose tackle. Really never saw much from him as a pass rusher before this year. Had 20 pressures last year, up to 50 this year. He can move for a fat boy. He'll be one of my favorite nose tackle prospects to watch in this draft class.
I do love a good moving fat boy.
Yeah,
I can get on board with that. I haven't seen him with his shirt off yet, but I'll let you know when I do. Let's go to edge defender Alex Highsmith, another guy. I mean, this is a guy that's graded really well for Charlotte. Yes, against poorer competition than some of the other edge defenders in this class, but I really do like the tools he does have. I think he's an interesting story. I think he's getting better as he moves forward. Could get even better in the NFL. And the other edge defender here, Josh Uche of Michigan. I like him. I think Josh Uche is interesting. He's athletic. He can bend off the edge. I think he relies on the inside move a lot. And every time I see an edge defender that relies on the inside move, I start to think,
worrisome.
Yeah, it's worrisome. You need to win outside. You need to beat people to the outside shoulder. And I think when you rely on this inside move, it doesn't necessarily translate to the next level because you can't use it every time.
Yeah, so he's got the second highest pass rushing win rate in the nation, but he's still only rushed the passer less than 200 times this year, or fewer than 200 times, excuse me. Fewer than only played 197 snaps all of last season. So yes, he's been productive, but it's on such a small sample size. I do think Senior Bowl will be nice for him to see what ways he wins, how he just approaches one-on-ones. Is it all going to be, inside moves again, or can he win the edge against these guys? Is he going to weigh in at 240, which is what he kind of looks like, or is he going to be, that 250 threshold and actually be able to hold up on the edge? Because a lot of times for his third downs, he'll be standing up on the interior and stunting, and that's how he's gotten home for a lot of his pressure. So he's interesting, has moved up our board just because he has been so damn productive, but I think there's still kind of that hesitancy to really put him up in that top group.
6'3", 238 pounds. I agree that if he doesn't sneak into that 250 range, that was a big thing for Brian Burns. I remember talking to Brian Burns. He said, "I need to get to 250.
Yeah.
I don't want to be 249.
2 gallons of water, and
I can't do 248.
Now.
I need to get to 250." And I think that was a big thing that he stepped up for. Let's go to linebacker here, Zack Bond. We talked about him a little bit on the Tuesday podcast.
Yeah, we just talked about him on the Tuesday podcast, but yeah.
I turned on the tape and wanted to look specifically at him as a pass rusher, because I think he has graded very well as a pass rusher. I think if you're going to watch a game for Zack Bond that's going to maybe convince you that he can play edge defender, that Michigan game, he beats up on that right tackle.
He actually wins the edge too, unlike Uche. A lot of his wins come around the edge of offensive lineman.
He's got a nice inside spin too. I mean, he jacked him up a couple times too. Like a bull rush from Zack Bond, who's not that heavy, was pretty impressive. I think this is a guy that is good at a lot of things. It's not a master of nothing. I think I think he's good at a lot of things, and I think he's a very impressive
football player. Is I think we call him.
Logan Wilson, a football player as well. He's the other off-ball linebacker here, the Wyoming kid. I get scared about these types, man. You see him. He's not short, but he looks like he might have maybe some short arms.
Oh no, you calling him?
I don't know.
T-Rex?
It could be a T-Rex here, but he's athletic. He takes on blocks aggressively. I don't know if he's going to have the same level of success in the NFL, just given he's a little bit smaller. He's thin. He's a little bit thinner than maybe you'd expect.
Logan Wilson, he's 250. Wait, are we talking about the same guy here, Wyoming?
No, he looks thin on tape though. It just doesn't seem. It doesn't look thick to me.
He's 6'2", 250. I don't know. He comes downhill, and when he takes on, as a blitzer, he rocks offensive linemen backwards, rocks running backs backwards. So I think he's got enough pop in his game to add to that aspect. And I was more so at that size. He moved a lot better than I had expected. So I think he's moved up our board from that perspective.
I mean, I'm interested to see what he weighs in at, because if it is,
he will be at Senior Bowl. So
if it is 250, I think I'd be even more impressed with his tape, because he moves like a guy that's like 240 on the back end of 240. So. He's an interesting player. Let's go to Caleb Farley. I like this guy a lot, too, for Virginia Tech. He had some great breaks on the ball in the UNC game. I think he was an aggressive player. I put in here plays through the target. I don't know if you know, but it means I feel like sometimes you go for the pass breakup before the pass is caught, but he plays through that target and tries to break it up when it's even after it's caught. And I think that's very impressive for me. I think would firmly recommend watching his UNC tape. I think it was very good.
I think this dude's a freak. He's 6'2", 207. He's massive, massive cornerback. And he had some plays where guys had a few steps on him, and he made it up in a blink of an eye. I'm very curious to see what he ends up running. Only a redshirt sophomore, really wasn't on our radar last year after he had a 59.3 coverage grade. Gave up 463 yards last year, only 265 this year, 19 catches on 50 targets. I mean, he was dominating that left cornerback position for Virginia Tech this year. I'm interested to see if he declares, 2, what he tests out athletically, because I thought, this could buy at 207, 6'2", 207. I thought he could run the 4.3. It's like
he's
that's
only a
redshirt
kind of sophomore,
speed
so
I saw from him. So so there's a good chance he does come back. Not a lot of guys do, and he really wasn't on a lot of draft radars. Haven't heard a lot of talk about him, but watching him down the stretch this season, he played some ridiculously good football in the ACC.
2 Utah players on this list, 2 Utah defensive backs, Jalen Johnson and Terrell Burgess, both earning on the all draft stock team. Yeah,
we've talked about Johnson a lot at this point, why he's impressed us, dominated Pac-12 play this year, really moved up our board. But Burgess, we haven't touched on a lot. He got a Senior Bowl invite in his own right, plays a lot of the slot, box safety role in that defense, and he's really physical. I really liked what I saw from him. I liked his ability in man coverage on the slot. A lot of times when you throw a safety on the slot, it's almost like a placeholder, or they'll play a lot of zone from there. He was playing man. He was getting up in guys' face. He was pressing them at the line of scrimmage. Really liked what I saw from him. So he's a physical box safety who's not necessarily there's box safeties and there's guys who can do the box and play in the slot. I think he is that the latter far more so than just a pure box, basically a linebacker.
I came away with a similar opinion. You turn on the Washington State game. He plays a ton of man coverage from the slot, and it looks very good. I think that's a big part of it too. He plays man coverage from the slot, a very difficult thing for most safeties to do. And I actually went in and split out his grades. He's got a 90.5 PFF coverage grade playing the slot and the box, and he's got a 69.2.
The same thing. Never mind.
He's got a 69.2 PFF coverage grade at free safety.
Yeah.
Even though he splits a lot of his time at both positions, I think he does belong in the slot/box at the next level. And when you have a guy that can play that position and really get things done in there, I think it's important.
Yeah, getting the job done in the box is important.
I mean, you just have to do it. All right, last guy on the all draft stock team, Antoine Winfield Jr. I was impressed with his range. I think he does have a lot of injury history, which is a concern. But I did the same split for him too: a 76.6 coverage grade at free safety, 90.3 coverage grade in the slot and in the box. So maybe he's
those are both good though.
Yeah,
like 76 is free safety. A lot of times you'll see guys get worse there because you get your bigger downgrades. You know, you get those minus 1.5s when you f up as a deep safety. Yeah. So it's good to see that he's not been doing that for them.
You can thrive outside the box.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, you don't have to be in the box 24/7. You can take a weekend off.
That makes sense.
I do think that Antoine Winfield, his range and ball skills on the back end, fantastic. And then, like I said on Tuesday's pod, he has his father's physicality. The way he attacks ball carriers, he goes at full speed, wants to lay the wood down, and definitely.
Jesus Christ.
Let's just move on to the draft.
Let's go. Lays the wood in the box.
Antoine Winfield,
keep it going. All right. So the next thing we're going to do here was we're actually going to do our interview with Conor Rogers of Bleacher Report. The host of Bleacher Report that was a very good interview. Very excited to get him. He gave us an open invite to the New York offices in Bleacher Report too. I said we take a little work trip. Before we do that though, we got to hear from our friends here at Proper Cloth. If you're watching the YouTube channel, you'll notice Mike and I look a lot better today. I went with the open look today, which I think Proper Cloth offers that versatility.
It's not just dress shirts.
Exactly. You can get the short sleeve. You can go long sleeve. I like yours though today. It looks nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't own a lot of dress shirts, and so and the ones I did own, I didn't realize they were supposed to fit the way this fits. And all I did was type in basically like other shirts that I wear, and then they sent me one that fit perfectly.
Yeah, and they do offer. They have like offices in the United States where if like something doesn't fit, they like push to you like, hey, this doesn't fit. You should send it back and get a perfect fit here because it's Proper Cloth. But yeah, we're really impressed with what they've done. They're sponsoring a lot of podcasts. Love what they do. The website's very easy to use, but go to propercloth.com/PFF today, and you can enter promo code PFF20 to get $20 off a shirt. And those start at $80. So there's some nice ones, though. You get up to the $300 range, you're sleeping on some nice things there. But I'm really excited about Proper Cloth, and we give a big thanks to our sponsor. Now, without further ado, let's talk to Conor. All right, we have Conor Rogers from Bleacher Report on 2-for-1 Drafts here with Mike Renner. Excited to talk to this guy. A great follow. If you're not following him, you got to follow him. Conor J. Rogers on Twitter.com. Conor, how you doing?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. We had to get you on. You're a great follower, and we really appreciate your insight. First question here, and I think it's an easy one. How did you get started with a job in football? How did you get into this process? How did you start scouting and all of that?
Well, to be honest with you, when I was in college, I was in business school, and I was just kind of bored of basically whatever I was doing at my internship at the time. And, I missed playing sports, and I obviously loved still following football and everything that went with it. So I started blogging, actually, for a couple different sites that don't even exist anymore, which is hilarious when I think about it. Like, if I ever want to go look at my old embarrassing work, it's not even on the internet anymore. But quickly after that, I latched on with a really great group called TurnOnTheJets.com under Joe Caporoso. And I really got my start there because their draft guy had left. He wasn't doing anything anymore. And somebody recommended me to them. So while I was in college, I was honestly just blogging. And this is the era of, a draft breakdown existed, so everybody was logging on there and watching broadcast cut-ups. This is probably 2013, I believe. And I was, trying to get through whatever it was at the time, 50, 75, 100 players, while also being a full-time student trying to graduate college, having, a part-time job, and probably going out and drinking too much beer at the time. So it was really just something I did it was something I did for fun. And, this could be a much longer story, but I'll keep it condensed. I ended up getting in at Bleacher Report as a research assistant, which is the lowest on the totem pole. working directly with Chris Sims for a while. And I mean, the stuff I learned from Chris, just from being in, a room going over stuff with him for years about football, and also Matt Miller, and then making my own connections across the NFL from some people that are a lot smarter than me that were willing to help me. It helped me become a lot better at this. And honestly, let's be real, the draft interest has taken off across the country the last couple of years, where fortunately it has become a full-time job for people like me and people like you, and I'm really lucky to be in it.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear, man. I got a little fun fact on that. How I started, I created my own website and did some blogging of my own. The Draft Pulse. Hello, that site doesn't exist anymore, but that was my.
I did not know that story.
That was my website there. It was terrible. The writing was awful. I think it was just getting started up. I think Melvin Gordon was still an underclassman. I was in love. Running back still mattered to me then, so I was pretty interested.
I was gonna say, so you started back then. What were some of like your early takes? Like,
Connor, I
don't care about your early takes.
I thought you want to hear some. Sorry, we got a little carried away. I'll drop one take. I had Melvin Gordon over Gurley. I thought Gordon was better. But, Connor, what were some of your early takes when you were in the blogging days?
Oh, man, that's a good one. I'm trying to think of what class that would be. Well, I remember at the time, I really wanted the Jets to draft Trey Smith, and that was the year they had the 9th and 13th pick, and I knew they weren't going to take him 9th, which I was cool with because I thought that was even a little early for him. He had that awful pinstripe bowl. I don't know if you remember, and I was like, this might be bad, especially when, like, Tavon Austin was there, and they were just running shallow crossers and dumping the ball off to him for 70 yards all the time. It's amazing the sick stuff I can remember. So when they took him in the second round, I was like, this is cool, and it ended up being an absolute disaster. So that's a really fun one. This one, you'd have to you have to call my dad verified. I don't think anyone would believe me except him because he always heard me rambling on about it. But I loved Russell Wilson. I really did. And I think that was a weird era where the NFL was so against drafting short quarterbacks, and me being an idiot, 19-year-old at the time, maybe even younger. I'm trying to think what year that was. I didn't have those kind of, like measurement requirements in my scouting. I didn't care that he was 5'11". I was like, this guy's awesome. He gets out of the pocket. He can throw the ball down the field. He's accurate. He's tough. And it's one of those ones where I look back on it, I'm like, sometimes my own ignorance actually helps because I think NFL scouts come up with these stupid rules. And it's good to see the league, so Kyler going number one last year, open to guys like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's get into some more recent drafts. I know we're diving into the history books here, but we got to talk about Quinnen Williams. He was, very high on our draft board. He earned one of the highest PFF grades we've seen in the college era for a defensive interior. But this year, man, has he struggled?
Yeah, he really has. It starts out with he was banged up throughout camp. He had an ankle injury early on this season. And it seems like he just never fully got on track. And then you have the people coming out and saying, that the scheme is holding him back or he's rotating in and out because they actually are pretty deep at the defensive line, considering they are not a good football team, but they have a lot on this defensive line, players that are playing pretty well, whether it's, Nathan Shepard and Foley Fatukasi are kind of the breakout guys from the 2018 class. They have Steve McClendon, who's been reliable for a while. They paid Henry Anderson a lot of money, who hasn't been a lot this year, but he was pretty good last year before they paid him, and he's still a solid player. And, of course, they had Leonard Williams before they traded him. So this was a deep group, but Quinnen Williams was taken third overall, guys. You're expected to come in and make impact plays. Now, it was interesting for me. I loved Quinnen Williams. I had him third overall, which seemed lower than everyone else. Obviously, Nick Bosa was the best player in the draft. And I had Ed Oliver second. I thought him and Quinnen were very different, but I thought there were certain things that Ed did better, or Ed was more ready for at the next level and was a little more versatile. And we're seeing that with Quinnen right now. He's on the ground a lot. I don't know if it's the ankle. That's a big question for me because the strength has not been there. He actually had his best first half of the season against Miami last weekend, and then he gets hurt. So the problem is every time he starts to turn it on, he's getting hurt. So I don't know if it's a conditioning or just poor luck. Sometimes that happens. I mean, he's 21 years old, guys. He'll turn 22 this month, I believe. it's one of those things where, I'm not out on him. I think he's definitely had some great flashes, but I think the Jets thought they were getting this impact player that can be a Fletcher Cox type of player, and that has not been the case so far this year.
Are you worried about him going forward? So this is the 2-for-1 draft podcast. We follow guys from college and then through their rookie season. We always talk about you want to see it at some point during the rookie year. Are you worried that you really just haven't seen it? The same guy we saw at Alabama.
I was until this last weekend significantly worried because, like I said, it's one thing where you're out there and you're not making impact plays. You're not, registering sacks, quarterback hits, even hurries, obviously. And Quinnen was just unblockable last year at Alabama. That's what's crazy in all this, especially when they felt they had to play him at shade nose or nose tackle a lot because they had so many guys and he wanted to start. And then this weekend against Miami, you really saw him turn it on and make those plays. Now, he blew up a play in the backfield on the first drive. He got called for a face mask. And then he has a great pass rush, and of course Fitz goes full Fitz and gets out of the sack somehow. He had a really nice quarterback hit on the same drive. So you saw him take over at times, but for him to come out and get hurt was a bummer. But before that, of course, you're a little worried because you kind of wonder, is he just not ready to be in the NFL right now because of, playing strength, or is he thinking too much, or is it Greg Williams? And Greg Williams has done a really good job this year with a lot of backups, but you have to wonder how much Greg Williams is actually letting him loose. So I think it's not at the point of fear right now, but there are a lot of eyes on him each week. I'll say that.
Yeah, Greg Williams, the same guy that told Myles Garrett to only use 2 moves, so there is a chance there. I think the injuries though can't be understated. I think they can fall off a bit when you're talking about Quinnen Williams, but being as injured as he's been, that's going to slow development for a rookie. Where all rookies across the board, even the guys drafted at number 3 overall, have this curve. It takes time to adjust to the speed of the game. Similar to Clelin Ferrell, who we kind of want to get into next. We know that the Clemson edge player, Clelin Ferrell, you had 10th overall. He goes to the Oakland Raiders and has really struggled. He's, I think, struggled even more so than Quinnen Williams. He hasn't flashed enough, for me, in my opinion, to a point where you start to get really worried. What has your opinion been of Clelin Ferrell so far? And then also, what was your opinion of him coming out?
Yeah, well, I think this was a reach. I think everybody had enough awareness to say that now. I mean, especially when you take him where they did. Now, with Cleveland, I had him 10th overall, and I definitely thought he was a safe player, but he was a high floor player. But I also thought the ceiling overall was not a guy you take top 5. He got off-the-chart grades in interviews, character, being the leader of a championship football team, being a guy that could set the edge, being a high-motor pass rusher, basically all of those things that you want. The problem is, guys, I don't know how you use a top 5 pick on a player like that in that situation they were in, where Oakland really needed an edge pass rush. Since they traded Khalil Mack, obviously they've taken swings like Arden Key. They reach for Cleveland. Now, I don't think he's necessarily been really bad. It's not like where he doesn't look like he doesn't belong on the field. But once again, it goes back to Quinnen, where what impact are you getting for that caliber of pick? And I don't think they've gotten it yet. And with Oakland, I could speak to this because I got a good pulse on them before the draft, after the draft. I do think they have a lot of smart people in that front office. But the general theme I got from talking to a lot of people around there was that they wanted to have a safe draft, I guess, but in a way, a super high character draft. And sometimes teams get so absorbed in that you do pass up on talent. I think when you look at how far Brian Burns was a super high character player, but a lot of teams felt that he had a potentially dangerous floor. So that's an interesting example. They took a running back in the first round when no matter how good Josh Jacobs was this year, he did have some injury questions coming out. We're seeing the shoulder now. He's a great player, but once again, a running back in the first round just because he felt he was a safe player. Jonathan Abram had some shoulder problems in college, and those translate to the NFL, but they loved his character. They liked his leadership on the back end. And I'm not saying these were bad picks because I didn't think they had a horrendous draft, especially when they get guys like Max Crosby, Foster Moreau on the back end that I thought were significantly undervalued in this draft. but just the general theme of their strategy seemed to go for high floor, high character players in this first swing from Mike Mayock's group.
I would 100% agree with that. I think that's great analysis of what they did. I think I have two things there. One, I think meeting players and how you grade character or value character and personality and stuff is dangerous, because I think you really do have to consider how much you value it, because if you put it at priority one, you are going to pass up on some significant athletes. You are going to pass up on some of those ceilings that you need to chase at the top half of the draft. Another thing I have there, too, is that I don't think it's necessarily a bad strategy to chase high-floor draft picks, especially with how bad the Raiders have drafted in recent years. I mean, they've missed on a ton of players kind of outside that 2014 draft with Carr, Gabe Jackson, Khalil Mack. Even T.J. Carey was in that draft, 7th rounder who plays for the Browns now. But I think
floors and ceilings is just difficult.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Sort of,
but I think it's a discussion worth having. It's a discussion worth having, talking about chasing a high floor or chasing a high ceiling, because high ceiling you're going to get bit. With Brian Burns, I think he was definitely the better player, but maybe you think he has the lower floor. It's an interesting way of looking at things. So here on 2-for-1 Drafts, we also like to do a little six-pack, playing on that beer pun as always. I think we force them sometimes, but I like the six-pack. It's going to run through 6 questions here and then kind of let you go. I know time's valuable. Let's move forward. First thing, what was the first NFL draft you remember watching on TV?
Ooh, that's a great one. I probably when the Jets had like 4. So I'm from New York. I grew up in a family full of Jets season ticket holders, so I had no choice but to be miserable. Maybe that's why I like the draft so much, because we're used to watching it like it's the Super Bowl. The year they had like 4 first-round picks, it was like absolutely ridiculous. I remember that one. Obviously, when they got Keyshawn, was being one. So we're talking when I was literally 7, 8 years old. I was watching the NFL draft with my dad, knowing that this was very important, but not understanding the full implications of it at the time just yet.
Dude, I don't even remember watching the mid-'90s like that. I don't think I watched until early 2000s. Those are way back, though.
Well, also, it was in Radio City. So, like, here's, like, a really interesting story, too, of my interest in the draft. At the time, since it was in Radio City for so long, and we were in New York, my dad was a firefighter in New York City, and his buddy ran like a freelance security company in the firehouse. So they used to actually freelance security for the players that went to the draft, because they do stuff all week. So like it was 2 years in a row they did it. So like the year Reggie Bush was in the draft, Gronkowski was in the draft, Vernon Davis, all of that stuff. So, like, that also piqued my interest, because it was like, oh, yeah, I just spent the day with all of these guys working, like, a part-time job in security. Like, these guys are awesome. And, like, as a kid, you think, like, athletes are absolute superheroes, so you're, like, mind-blown by this.
That's pretty sweet.
First draft, I remember Robert Gallery going number 2. I grew up in Oakland. My dad's been a Raiders season ticket holder forever. But Robert Gallery, my dad's like, this guy's a mountain. He's gonna change the NFL. Little did we know he could barely play tackle or guard.
Change the Raiders, but yeah. All right, next question here on the 6-pack. First year you put together a draft board.
That would probably be 2000. I want to say 13, because that was the first year I was really doing it in a sense where I could cover that amount of landscape. Now, it was probably like 50 to 75 players at the time. Yeah, and there's a good chance it exists on this website that does not exist anymore. So I'm trying to think of the oldest one I can find. It's either in a spreadsheet or on turnonthejets.com. It's probably around 2014 or 2015.
That was the worst. 13 was a terrible draft, too.
That was
awful draft.
Awful draft.
Morris Claiborne, too, in that draft?
D. Milliner.
Oh, no, D. Milliner. That's who it was. Yeah, D. Milliner. Yeah. Man. Let's go to this next question here on the 6-pack. Biggest hit. You're the biggest one where you're like, dude, I was high on this player. No one else liked him, and now he's great. Where would you call that for you?
Oh, I went back to the Russell Wilson story. I think that would be a pretty good one. And that's a really good question as I go through the years now. They all start to blend together. It's absolutely ridiculous when I think about it. I'm hoping Kelvin Harmon is that guy this year, although I know the draft community liked Kelvin Harmon. They really did. It seemed like the NFL wanted nothing to do with him for whatever reason, but he stuck around in Washington, so good for him. I'm kind of hoping that's the one that pans out.
Yeah, there you go. And then, Mike, biggest miss here?
Biggest miss, yeah. Who was your biggest miss over the years here?
So it's so much easier to answer this one because these are the ones I remember. I don't even care about the hits anymore because, like, I feel like I should hit on players when you get asked to do this all year round. Mm-hmm. But Neal Hunter, oh, my God. I couldn't have been more wrong about Neal Hunter. When I remember watching him at LSU, I was like, what is the hype on this guy? Like, he looked amazing. He has these long arms. He's strong. You know, he's a pretty good athlete. But I just remember seeing him getting thrown out of plays a couple times, and I was like, man. And this is the time where you're hearing chatter about him being, you know, potentially a top 50 pick because that happens to every prospect every single year. And now Neal Hunter is on pace, when you look at his age and production, to be one of the best pass rushers of the modern era.
See, there's no shame to me, though. Or there is shame, but it's not nearly as much if you're low on a guy and the NFL is also low on a guy and then he turns out to be good. But I feel like it's way worse when you're high on a guy and say the NFL is low and then it turns out to stink. That's when it's God, I was like way off. Those to me are way more egregious misses because it's like, oh, if you're low on a guy, you could have theoretically drafted a good player.
Like Jerry Tillery so far this year.
Let's not bring up Jerry.
Sorry about that. Okay, so for
the ones that don't make sense, like Rashawn Garrett is an interesting one to me. Like, whatever reason, and I'm not writing him off, that'd be unfair, but it seems like the league and a lot of people, you know, that lean on the league, you know, really like Rashawn Gary, and I'm sitting there watching him not even being a top 2 player on his defense. So it's like, what am I missing here? That kind of stuff is the weird ones.
Yeah, let's go to most difficult position to scout for you. Obviously, they're all difficult to some degree, but it's one of those ones that maybe it's taken you a long time to understand and had to learn from a lot. But where are you at with the most difficult position for you?
To answer the latter part of that question would be quarterback. I think the nuances of the position, now I feel like I have a decent grasp of it. Now, you're always going to miss like crazy because it is the volatility of the position, the mental makeup aspect of the position, and just so many things can go wrong. But, I mean, that's one where I ask the most questions about to people that I trust that are pretty good at it, people that have drafted some pretty good quarterbacks. And I think, and also, like I said, a guy like Sims, who'll be the first person to tell you his NFL career didn't go the way he wanted to, but the guy understands playing the position and the game as good as anybody in media right now. And I think, you know, that was one where you're sitting there and you go, okay, this is a lot more complicated than I ever thought. This is not turning on film and just seeing a guy complete passes. There are a lot of different things. You know, and another person, Quincy Avery, that trains quarterbacks, I think some of the stuff that he goes over on Twitter, and I've met Quincy before and spent time with him. He's awesome. You know, he trains Deshaun Watson and Dwayne Haskins. Guys like that just know every little detail of the position, soaking up their kind of info is really important. Now, I think the one that's going to be the trickiest this year for me personally is probably going to be wide receiver because there's so much talent in the group. But at the end of the day, some of these guys are going to be misses, and stacking them the right, appropriate way is going to be very challenging. I don't really have, you know, I'm not really overthinking guys like CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith. Those guys are easy evals. But when you get into the second round of the group, I know the most polarizing one on Twitter has been Tyler Johnson, but there's a lot of guys like that. I think that's going to be the trickiest one this year because of the volume of the position.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone at the receiver position. The NFL themselves pretty much have sucked at it over the past 5 or so years. So, yeah.
And with the quarterback position, too, I think it's very difficult to scout, just scouting the tape alone, but also I think it's the one position where personality and off-field is so important. Like, Bruce Gradkowski is an analyst with PFF now, and the stories he tells about Jamarcus Russell are like, oh my gosh, if I talked to Jamarcus Russell, I don't think he'd be even on my board. It was that bad. Like, of what, in terms of how he treated, you know, working out and, you know, studying film was incredible. I think off-field is so important there, and I think that's what really makes it difficult for people who don't have that access. Go ahead.
All right, what position then, flip side of the coin, last one here in the six-pack, what position do you think is your best in terms of over the course of your scouting career? What have you hit the most on or just feel most comfortable with your projections?
Well, it's funny I said Neal Hunter was my miss. Now, that was, you know, many years ago. I think I've actually gotten much better at edge pass rusher. I think it's it's pretty easy to see what a guy is now at edge pass rusher. Now, some guys are late bloomers. Hunter was a guy that you underestimate his age and just how much he can develop. And once again, that could go back to being, a character kind of thing. But last year, the way I stacked this, it was easy to see that Nick Bosa was a pretty elite edge rusher. It was pretty easy to see Brian Burns' potential, and that Brian Burns was somebody that I thought was more ready to make an impact than people let on. It was easy for me to see that Clelin Ferrell was, what Clelin Ferrell was good at, and that Clelin Ferrell probably wasn't this double-digit sack or high-impact kind of guy. Now, Josh Allen has surprised me a little bit. I'll say that. I had Josh Allen, I think, 15th or 16th as 14th. I look at this right now. Yeah, and so when I look at it, that's not hating a guy. I had him in the first round. Yeah. But I think Josh Allen, some of the ways he got his sacks, his inflated numbers at Kentucky, I sat there scratching my head I don't know if this will translate instantly at the NFL. And he's been really good this year. But edge pass rusher, I feel pretty comfortable with. Cornerback, I often feel very comfortable with. And it's, those are the positions where you can get a really good feel for a guy on the tape he puts out in college.
100%. Well, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate you going through the six-pack. We're going to definitely have to connect in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. And then also, maybe we get you out here to Cincinnati. Watch some tape with us, grind some All-22, and show you the offices.
Or maybe we go to New York. That sounds a little more fun.
I try and make Cincinnati sound cool, Mike. Okay, I'm from California, and I can get on board with it. Food's not great. The weather kind of sucks. But outside of that, it's pretty great, man. I'm all for it. But, again, really appreciate your time. We'll definitely have to connect in Mobile, and maybe we get out to New York. Don't come to Cincinnati. Apparently, it's terrible. But thanks again, man.
Yeah, you guys have an open invite to New York. Sam and Steve have been through the office, so I think you guys owe me a visit. We could do a show and have a good time. But thanks again. I really appreciate you guys having me on. You guys do a great show and great work, and I'm sure I'll see you guys down at the Senior Bowl.
Of course, man. Thank you. All right, we're back. Let's do the draft special segment. I really liked getting Connor on the phone there. We definitely have to get him back on the podcast in the future. We're also going to see him in the Senior Bowl, so that'll be good. Draft special, so this is where we're going to talk about some of the best rookie matchups from the upcoming week. We got Drew Lock going against the Chiefs defense. And I know you did a deep dive on Drew Lock for a piece that was potentially going to come out for PFF this week.
Wasn't interesting enough.
We pulled away because of the sample size.
Yeah, we pulled away because take was basically good, but not he did some things well, but it wasn't oh man, he was reading defenses, hitting guys perfectly down the field, time after time. No, he relied a ton on Yak, had probably 3 nice throws in that game. I think we only gave him 1 big time throw, but also had 2 pretty rough decisions. The interception was pretty damn ugly. So there's good and bad. I think it's definitely, I want to see him. This is a huge week for him because they got a massive lead. They got a two-score lead against the Chargers, 2-score lead against the Texans, and then they just throttled that offense down. They took it out of his hands, and it's no disrespect to him. I'd do the same thing. If I had a rookie quarterback, I wouldn't let him lose the game, shatter his confidence, that sort of thing right off the bat. Let him get some easy completions, keep the momentum going, get some wins under his belt. But now you're going up against Patrick Mahomes. They're not going to be able to probably do that. They're not going to have a 2-score lead, and even if they do, that might disappear overnight. So you're going to have to put the ball in his hands, let him work a little bit more. So I'm just excited to see that. And I think I'll write that piece next week, and we'll get a much more definitive take on who Drew Lock is, I think, after this week's game. There's
an interesting opportunity, too. I'm going to try and stretch this out here to a little 3-for-1. Second-year players, Cortland Sutton.
No, we can't go to that.
No, you don't want to.
I'm kidding. We can go to Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, what's your take on it? Because he's graded really well for us this year, and you know who hasn't is Deshaun Hamilton.
I know.
A guy that people really liked coming out of Penn State, a little bit shiftier, plays mostly in the slot. But Cortland Sutton,
hands have been butt.
But Cortland Sutton, though, is a guy that's not a big separator in the NFL, more of a bigger receiver with great contested catch ability. He's looking good.
Well, I think that was the biggest thing. Was I thought he could, be more of a separator for a big receiver at the NFL level, but I didn't think he'd be this good in contested situations too. He's had so many just superb catches going over guys. I just didn't see that. Playing at SMU, you can do that against cornerbacks in the group of 5. You're not going to do that necessarily against NFL cornerbacks. Just didn't necessarily see it. There's so few guys that can do it the way he's done it so far this year. So a massive year 2 for him, and only 1 drop on 60 catchable passes.
Wow.
The hands after 9 drops on 51 last year.
Deshaun
Hands been a lot
Hamilton
better.
Wishes.
And Deshaun has not been necessarily
struggling
the same.
With the job.
Very.
Is
they got
SMU
themselves
wide
#1.
receiver you? I'm asking for a friend.
Who Who else we got from SMU?
Prochet.
Is that your friend?
Reggie Roberson. I mean, there's some talent. There's some talent.
They're as much wide receiver as Texas is DB.
Fair. All right, let's go to Max Crosby, the Oakland Raiders edge defender. We're going against Juwan Taylor, a rookie-on-rookie action.
Yes.
The Jacksonville Jaguars. Max Crosby so far this year, 39 total pressures. Cleveland Ferrell, the team's first-round pick, 23 total pressures, and some bad things on that tape as well. Not really, standing out as a pass rusher.
You didn't have to bring up Cleveland Ferrell in this. It was just Max Crosby against Juwan Taylor. We don't have to talk about anyone else here.
You're right. Let's go back to Max Crosby. He's looked very good this year, though, and we thought that transition from Eastern Michigan to the NFL is going to take some time, and I think it still is. He's not grading out at a very high level.
Oh, yeah. It's not like week in and week out he's been a guy you can rely on. He's had some big games against some bad tackles, but he's going up against a rookie like Juwan Taylor. Was in college last year too. So he's the guy they probably, if you're going to beat up on someone, it should be someone like Juwan Taylor. But Taylor's had himself a good year. 67.1 pass blocking grade. Yes, he's given up 7 sacks, but only 34 pressures on 606 pass blocking snaps because the Jags have been passing a ton there this year. I do like what I've seen from him. I think for a guy who's only junior coming out, I expected some struggles out the gate. This is a very encouraging rookie season from him. Far more encouraging than Cam Robinson's was coming out. Mm-hmm. We thought so. Yeah.
Let's break out the duck calls here because we got Devlin Hodges going against the Bills defense. What's your take on Devlin Hodges? I'm interested to know what you think.
So that game was, again, like they really protected him against Arizona. They didn't really open it up whatsoever, but he then also protected the football in his own right. And I do think he was quick to scramble, but he's fairly athletic. Like if that first read wasn't necessarily there, he ducked his eyes a lot and was running out of the pocket. So from that perspective, if you're projecting forward, that's not necessarily a great thing to always be ducking your eyes. But you can get away with it. And in the short term, you're not expecting him to be, Drew Brees. You're not expecting him to be this all-world guy. You're going to take any first down you can get any way you can get it. So I do think it's better that he does that than throw some ugly picks. So I like what I've seen from him in terms of playing winning football for them right now. Not necessarily projecting forward. Just need to see more downfield throws. Like they did so few, and on some of them were pretty ugly. His ball placement.
What's his average depth of target this year? It's got to be super low. He does not throw the ball downfield at all. They really keep the training wheels on him.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can look that up for you.
Oh, no worries. I know a site. I can check it out.
Okay.
But I do think you need a larger sample size to see all of his, more throws from Devlin Hodges, but you also need to see a large sample size of throws of like 10 or more air yards. I don't think he has a ton of those on his tape right now, and they're not asking him to do those probably for a reason. They don't want him taking those risks necessarily. Let's go into our last segment here, our chug.
But he's playing the Bills D, so that's a defense that's good this week. Like if you're not going to be able to dink and dunk the Bills D, they're going to lock down. You're not going to get a ton of first downs by doing that. So you're going to have to make some nice throws. His average depth of target this year actually 8.9, so not bad.
Okay. Let's go ahead and chug a prospect here. Utah State's Jordan Love. Well, no longer Utah State. This guy's declaring for the 2020 NFL Draft. The guy with a very awful touchdown to interception ratio, has not had a good year, struggled against good defenses. You look at that LSU game, did not have a good day there. I think Jordan Love, a very interesting decision for him because he still can get a lot better potentially if he returned to Utah State or transferred.
Yes. So this one, I go back and forth on whether it's like if you really believe in yourself so much that you think you could play your way into a top 5 pick next year, then you believe that you could win a starting job as a second or third rounder, and then you're closer to your second contract as a quarterback. Like financially, whatever, like the decision, I can understand wanting to just get to the NFL right away, but I just 17 touchdowns, 16 picks right now. Is a GM going to take that in the first round? You're going to get roasted, and especially if that guy looks like DeShone Kizer year one. If it's just bad out the gate, and you took him top 20 in this draft, you're not going to last long as GM. Like that's McCagnon took Hackenberg, and he was gone 2 years later. So here are the positives for Jordan Love. Ball jumps out of his hand. That were in the draft guide here. You can go get with the Edge or Elite subscription. Ball jumps out of his hands. Sling it to all levels, shows touch attacking between linebackers and over and under the safeties. Overall accuracy as a plus was 14th in 2018 among returning draft eligible QBs in terms of accuracy percentage. One of the best in the country at avoiding sacks. This, to me, is probably his biggest thing. He is so good in the pocket in terms of guys in his face. He gets rid of the ball. He dumps it, doesn't take those negative plays. Converted pressure sacks only 10.5% of the time. That's like
Which is rare.
Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, that's like one of those. That's an elite level. And for a guy to be doing that, like I said, as a sophomore last year, it was pretty impressive. But the negatives, even last year in his best year, had only a 51.5 passer rating under pressure. So it's almost as if, yes, he avoids sacks, but he's not necessarily making good things happen with the ball when that pressure does come. A ton of screens in Utah State's offense. A quarter of his yards in 2018 came via screens. That was a lot. So if you're looking for a big regression, that was a big part of it as well, as he didn't get a lot of free yards on screens this year. Doesn't always bring his lower half with him as he throws. His feet are all over the place in terms of they lead to a lot of accuracy issues down the field. Doesn't always step through his throws. Relies on his arm. Like, he'll have a lot of throws. It's almost very similar to Aaron Rodgers nowadays, where yes, you see that Aaron Rodgers, when he does step into a throw and wants it to go a place, it'll go there. But if he doesn't, there's a lot of times he thinks he can do it without it, and then it ends up not happening. So he relies on his arm too much. Has some balls that just die down the football field, and he throws late over the middle of the field a lot. And that even was 2018. He was doing that. 2019, it got worse. And the biggest thing for me is his splits: first half of the game, second half of the game. This year, first half of the game, 85.7 passing grade. Second half of the game, we're thinking they're down. Second half, trying to come back, 56.2 passing grade. They pressed a lot. Most turnover-worthy plays in the nation in the second half of games.
Wow.
So it's not a good thing to have, is when you're trying to come back. Yes, you don't want to have the guy who's conservative. You want to have a more variance at that point to try to win you games. But the way he was just too far in that one regard.
Where would you start to feel comfortable as a GM to take him?
Oh, man, that's so tough.
Third, fourth?
No,
wait, it's fourth.
It's earlier than that. I still think he's probably a second. If you draft him in the second round, I'm not going to argue with you at all. Like where Drew Lock got drafted last year, 40th. Like, if you're taking a guy there, you're saying, I have reservations about him. I know that last year didn't go his way, but I see the potential. Like, he's in that Deshaun Kaiser, Drew Lock sort of realm of you see the talent, but there's so far to go that I'm not going to waste a first-round pick on him, a guy who could be an immediate impact starter. Second round is a little different. I'd be willing to take him then.
You see someone take him in the top 20, though, you get a little scared.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's like you.
Because then there's more pressure on him.
And then, yeah.
That's a good point. Well, that's going to do it for the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast. I know I did a little 3-for-1 there, reluctantly. I'm glad you obliged there. But thanks again. Remember, you can see us on YouTube Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're also on Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to tune in next week. But this has been Austin Gayle and Mike Renner, 2-for-1 Drafts.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.